All right, let's picture this. A land where, the greatest wildlife migration on Earth happens,
Hmm.
where ancient cultures are alive and kicking and volcanic peaks scrape the sky.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Tanzania. It's really in a league of its own, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You've got the Serengeti Plains, the Ngorongoro crater,
Mhm.
Mount Kilimanjaro towering over everything, and then those amazing white sand beaches in Zanzibar. It offers so much.
It really does. And, Tanzania is a huge magnet for travelers, obviously promising these unforgettable experiences.
Right.
But what we're aiming to do in this deep dive is, well, go a bit beyond the usual travel brochures.
Okay.
Our mission, really, is to give you a proper understanding of the practical stuff, the cultural bits, and the responsible ways to travel.
So it's memorable for the right reasons.
Exactly. For you, but also making sure you leave a genuinely positive footprint behind. Think of this as your shortcut to really unpack knowledge for a trip that's informed and, well, impactful.
Okay, so let's jump right into that Tanzanian dream. We often hear that Tanzania is arguably the best place in the world for a safari, even though, let's be honest, it's not the cheapest option out there. Why is that? What makes it stand out despite that higher price?
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? In Tanzania, that higher price tag,
Yeah.
it often isn't just about, fancy lodges.
Right.
It's actually a direct investment in a better, less crowded wildlife experience.
Ah, okay.
Those higher costs, they help maintain the parks, manage how many vehicles are allowed in, which means much better viewing for you, less jostling for position.
Makes sense.
And think about the scale, Serengeti National Park. It's just immense, 30,000 square kilometers. That's like 20 times bigger than Kenya's Masai Mara.
Wow.
And it has some of the highest densities of predators anywhere. But, it's not just safaris. Tanzania has incredible diversity.
Like what else?
Well, you could trek Mount Kilimanjaro, obviously, or explore places like the Uzambara Mountains for some real off-grid trekking, or even Mount Meru, still a serious climb, but less expensive than Kili.
Okay, so we've got this amazing picture of what's possible. Let's bring it back down to earth a bit and talk about the practical stuff. Getting there.
Right.
First things first, visas. People sometimes leave this late, but it's critical, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Getting the visa sorted is like the foundation of your trip. You've got to get it right.
So how does it work now?
Okay, so Tanzania's visa applications are now all handled online, either through their e-visa platform, which is what they recommend, or you can still do it on arrival.
Okay,
But the key thing is they don't issue visas at embassies anymore. That's stopped.
got it. And I heard something about U.S. citizens.
Yes, that's a specific point. If you've got a U.S. passport and you're going for tourism, there's this bilateral agreement. It means you have to apply for a multiple entry visa.
Even for one trip.
Even for a single trip, yeah. That one costs $100 USD. Most other folks just need the ordinary visa for tourism, which is $50 USD.
That's a really important heads up for Americans. Now, you mentioned some people fall into a referral visa category. What's the deal there? Does that mean they could get stuck?
It could, potentially,
Yeah.
yes. If you're from certain countries and you need to check the official list on the Tanzanian immigration website, you fall into this referral category.
Okay.
And for those people, the absolute crucial thing is you must apply online and wait for that approval before you book flights or hotels. Don't pay for anything until you have the visa approval.
Wow. Okay. How long does that take?
They strongly advise applying at least 6 weeks, maybe even 2 months in advance. Because without that pre-approval, you just won't get in. Simple as that.
Right. And basic passport stuff.
Yep, need at least 6 months validity left on your passport from your entry date, and at least one completely blank page for the visa sticker.
Okay.
And here's another really critical detail, actually. They only accept passports with M or F sex markers listed.
Oh, okay. That's very specific.
It is. And just a couple more points on visas. A tourist visa means tourism only. No volunteer work that needs a special Class C residence permit.
Right.
You can't use a business visa or that multiple entry visa instead of a residence permit if you're actually planning to live or work there long term.
Gotcha.
Oh, and the transit visa. That's $30, strictly for passing through, maximum 7 days. You definitely can't use it for a quick holiday.
That's a lot of vital detail just to get in the door smoothly. Okay, shifting gears. Timing. When's the best time to go for, say, wildlife or trekking?
Timing really does make a difference. For the best wildlife viewing, generally, the long dry season is your best bet. That's June to October.
Why then?
Well, the vegetation is thinner, easier to see through, And animals tend to gather around rivers and water holes, so they're more predictable, more visible.
Makes sense.
If you specifically want to see the wildebeest calving season in the Serengeti, which is incredible, then you're looking at January and February.
Okay. And what about avoiding crowds?
The shoulder seasons. May and early June can be good. Fewer people, maybe a bit of rain, but often not too much.
But downsides.
Well, if you're thinking about climbing Kilimanjaro during the main rainy seasons, like March, April, or November, you could be dealing with really muddy roads just getting to the mountain, and some rural areas can flood pretty quickly. So, something to consider.
Right. And once you're actually in Tanzania, how do people get around? Are there good budget options or maybe some to avoid?
Getting around?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got a few main choices. Internal flights are definitely the quickest way to cover long distances, say between the Northern Safari Circuit and Zanzibar.
But pricey.
Yeah, they're more expensive. You might be looking at around $350 US per person one way. So it adds up. Driving is the other main way, usually in safari vehicles organized by your tour company.
What about public transport, those minibuses?
The dala-dalas. Yes, they are the cheapest option, and they go almost everywhere. But their safety record isn't great, unfortunately.
Not bad.
Well, one of the sources we looked at mentioned a guide whose friend actually lost a leg in a dala-dala accident. So, it's a real risk.
Oof. Okay.
If you are backpacking and decide to use them, the advice is to go straight to the official ticket office at the bus station. Don't deal with the touts hanging around outside.
Good tip.
But honestly, for most tourists, especially on safari, the reality is that Tanzania is very much set up for using tour companies who handle all the transport logistics for you. It's just easier and generally safer.
Okay, so we've covered the practicalities of getting there and getting around. But let's move on to something just as important. Traveling with purpose. This isn't just about ticking boxes, is it? It's about connecting, maybe giving back.
Exactly. That's a really key part of a meaningful trip to Tanzania. When we talk about ethical or impactful travel there, it basically boils down to three things.
What are they?
1, preserving wildlife and habitats. 2, empowering local communities and helping preserve their cultures. And 3, supporting responsible wildlife tourism practices.
So how does that look on the ground? For conservation, for example.
Well, it means things like consciously trying to minimize your own carbon footprint, maybe choosing lodges with good environmental practices, supporting conservation projects directly if you can.
Okay.
And when you're actually viewing wildlife in places like the Serengeti or Ngorongoro, it means making sure your guide follows the rules, doesn't get too close, doesn't disturb the animals. Responsible viewing.
And the community side, how can travelers support local people directly?
This is where community-based tourism comes in. Things like homestays, taking cultural tours led by locals, buying crafts directly from artisans in their workshops.
Right.
These initiatives put money directly into the hands of local residents, gives them sustainable livelihoods, and lets travelers, like you, contribute directly to the local economy and maybe even social projects.
That sounds like a much richer experience overall for everyone. And Tanzania is famous for its cultural diversity, right? Over 120 tribes.
That's right. It's incredibly diverse. The Maasai are probably the most well-known.
The red cloaks.
Exactly. They're red shukas. And the intricate beadwork they wear, it actually tells you about their age and social status.
Fascinating.
And they have that famous jumping dance, the Adumu, performed by the young warriors, the Morans, and ceremonies like Unoto, marking the transition to adulthood.
I've heard about a circumcision ritual, too.
Yes, the Emirata. Historically, it was for both boys and girls, but it's really important to know that female circumcision is illegal in Tanzania now and strongly discouraged because of, well, severe health complications.
Right.
Sadly, it does still happen in some very remote rural areas, but it's definitely not something promoted or condoned.
Okay.
And the Maasai also have this deep connection to their cattle. They believe all livestock is basically a gift from God.
Amazing. Are there other groups travelers might encounter?
Oh, definitely. Take the Hadzabe, for example. They're one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa.
Oh, can you visit them?
You can, but it's a very specific kind of visit. You need a specialist guide, someone who speaks their language, and ideally has lived with them for a while.
Why is that?
Well, partly for communication, but also because they're nomadic. So visits aren't guaranteed. The guide needs to know where they might be.
And what's the experience like?
You get a glimpse into their traditional lifestyle, maybe learn how they make fire with sticks, perhaps even join them on a short hunt, though obviously just observing. It's pretty unique.
Sounds incredible. Who else?
Then there are the Chaga people, living on the slopes of Kilimanjaro. Interestingly, their clothing now shows quite a bit of European influence, though traditionally they wore cowhide.
Okay.
Marriage is really important, often involving livestock given as a bride price.
Yeah.
And they have a coming-of-age ceremony for girls called unyago.
Any unique customs?
They have this fascinating ritual of reconciliation.
Mm.
If there's been a disagreement, one person offers the other a folded masale leaf tied in a knot. It's done silently.
Mm.
It's a gesture of asking for forgiveness, and the tradition is that it cannot be refused. It must be accepted.
Wow, that's powerful. Any others we should mention? Maybe the Sukuma or Makonde?
Yes, good examples. The Sukuma are one of the largest ethnic groups. They're known for being very musical and for their amazing dynamic dances. There's one called the Bogobogobo dance. It includes acrobatics, really complex choreography.
Yeah.
It's quite something to see.
Okay.
And the Makonde, they are masters of wood carving, especially using that dark ebony wood and redwood.
I think I've seen those carvings, the tree-like ones.
That's probably the Ujamaa, which means the family tree. It symbolizes family, unity, community cohesion. Really beautiful work. And interestingly, they have a matrilineal society inheritance, passes down the female line.
Fascinating. So with all these different cultures, any general tips on etiquette?
Good question. Handshakes are common, especially between people of the same sex, and they might last a bit longer than you're used to in the West.
Okay.
Between men and women, especially outside of maybe a business context, a polite nod is often enough.
Incl.
Yeah, important point. Outside of your hotel or beach resort, it's really advisable to dress modestly. Covering shoulders and knees is generally a good idea. Unfortunately, clothing considered immodest can sometimes attract unwanted negative attention. So better to err on the side of conservatives.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked experiences, culture. Let's get real about the money side.
Ah, yes. Safari economics.
We've established Tanzania isn't the cheapest. Locals might have a low cost of living, but for tourists wanting to do safaris and things, well, the cost of enjoying it is high. Very high.
That's absolutely true. It's a key thing to understand.
So how does it break down? What are we talking cost-wise?
Okay, let's try and put some rough figures on it. If you're looking at a shared group camping safari, the most basic option, you might start around $250 per person per day.
Okay, that's the entry level.
Pretty much. A private budget safari may be $350 a day. Mid-range, think $450-ish per person per day. And then luxury. That starts around $600 a day and goes way, way up.
How far up?
Well, the sources mentioned ultra-luxury places hitting $15,000 per night.
$15,000 a night.
Per person, per night in some cases, yeah.
Wow, okay. So what's the biggest thing driving those huge price differences?
Accommodation. That's the single biggest factor, hands down.
Right.
You've got everything from, $20 a night basic hostels or campsites outside the park gates up to those incredibly luxurious lodges inside the parks.
And the lodges charge per person?
Usually, yes, per person, per night. And that often includes full board, all your meals.
So what distinguishes budget from mid-range from luxury in terms of the actual place you sleep?
Okay, so budget might mean camping, maybe at basic lodges with limited solar power, perhaps shared bathrooms. Mid-range usually gets you comfortable lodges or permanent tented camps, proper beds, maybe an ensuite bathroom, but perhaps with a bucket shower where staff bring hot water.
Okay.
Luxury means larger rooms, often private plunge pools, maybe fine dining, and sometimes they even swap long drives between parks for internal flights for convenience.
Got it. Accommodation is key. What else pushes the price up?
Park fees. They are a major part of the cost. Especially for Kilimanjaro trips, they can be 50, even 70% of the total cost.
Wow.
And they're significant for safaris, too. The Serengeti, for example, has higher fees than some other parks.
Is it worth it?
Most people say yes, absolutely. Like we said, that higher fee often contributes to a better, less crowded experience inside.
Okay. And group size matters too, you said.
Definitely. If you're traveling solo and on a private safari, you're covering all the fixed costs yourself, the vehicle, the guide, salary, etc. So the per-person cost is much higher.
Right.
If you join a scheduled group safari, or even form your own small group, you share those costs. That can mean savings of, say, 12 to 27% compared to going private as a solo traveler.
Which brings us to choosing who you actually go with. The tour company.
A massive decision. And here's something interesting.
Go on.
The sources suggest that local Tanzanian safari companies often provide the best value for money.
Really? Better than big international agencies?
Often, yes. They tend to operate on tighter margins, maybe 10–15%, with perhaps only 3–5% actual profit after their overheads.
Ah.
And they get special trade prices on accommodation that they can pass on.
Okay.
And the advice was interesting. Sometimes the smaller, up-and-coming local companies are actually more consistent with high service levels, newer vehicles, and experienced guides.
Why is that?
Apparently, some of the bigger, more popular local outfits sometimes end up renting older, substandard trucks during peak season just to meet demand.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Any specific local companies mentioned as good?
Yeah, the sources highlighted a few with good reputations, like Shadows of Africa, Bright African Safaris, Livingstone Safari Tanzania, and one called Majestic Kilimanjaro, which was noted for putting profits back into the local community.
That's good to know. So what about the big international travel agents then?
Well, they usually just subcontract the actual safari to a local Tanzanian company anyway, and then they add their own markup on top, which can be significant, like 30% or even up to 300% in some cases, to cover their own costs and profits. They tend to cater more to the very high-end market, people spending, $15,000 plus.
Okay. What about just renting a 4x4 and driving yourself, DIY safari?
The sources strongly advise against that in Tanzania.
Why not? Seems like it would save money on a guide.
It might save on the guide fee, but you often end up overpaying for park entries or accommodation because you don't get the tour operator rates. And crucially, you'll almost certainly miss seeing a lot of wildlife.
Because you don't know where to look.
Exactly. The guides have radios, they share information, they know the animals' habits. Tanzanian safaris are they're really set up for using guides and safari companies. It's not like self-driving in, say, South Africa.
Got it. And Kilimanjaro trek costs?
Right. Ballpark figures for Kili climbs range from about $2,000 up to $6,000 per person. That's typically for a trek lasting 3 to 7 days. And again, park fees are a huge chunk of that.
Okay. Beyond the big things like tours and accommodation, what other costs should people budget for? Little things that add up.
Tipping. Definitely budget for tipping. It's very much part of the culture and expected for good service.
How much? And in what currency?
Preferably tip in US dollars, small bills if possible. A common guideline is around $20 USD per day for your main driver guide for the vehicle. Or if there are two of you, maybe $10 per person per day.
Okay. And at lodges.
For lodge staff, camps often have a general tipping box. Around $5 USD per adult per night put into the box is a reasonable suggestion.
Anyone you don't tip?
Interestingly, yes. Tipping isn't typically expected when you visit, say, a Maasai village or meet the head zubby.
So how do you support them?
The best way is usually by buying some of their handicrafts or souvenirs directly from them.
Speaking of souvenirs, haggling.
Oh, yes. Bartering is very common and expected in markets and curio shops. Don't be shy, but keep it friendly and polite.
Any examples?
Well, one source mentioned getting a painting initially priced at $400 down to $40 for an A2 size, or an $80 bracelet down to maybe $20 or $30. So significant negotiation is possible.
Good to know. What about clothing? Buy it there or bring it?
Definitely cheaper to buy your safari clothes before you go. Hotel gift shops will be much more expensive.
What kinds of clothes?
Light layers, muted colors, beige, khaki, green, brown. That's best for blending in and not disturbing wildlife.
Anything to avoid?
Yes. Definitely avoid bright colors like red or orange. Animals can spot them easily. And, crucially, do not wear army-style camouflage clothing. It can actually be illegal for civilians to wear in Tanzania.
Right. That's vital.
And if you plan on doing any walking safaris, proper sturdy walking shoes or boots are a must, not just sandals.
Okay. Health costs. Vaccines.
Yeah. Factor in potential costs for travel health consultations back home, which might be $15 to $100. Then fees for administering the shots, maybe $10, $20 per shot. And the vaccines themselves can range from $10 to $150 or more per dose.
Any mandatory ones?
Yellow fever vaccine is required if you are arriving from a country where yellow fever is endemic. Check the list. Otherwise, recommended ones usually include hepatitis A, typhoid, tetanus. Malaria prevention is also key.
Right. Anything else on costs? Maybe specialist trips?
Yes. If you're keen on something specific like a dedicated birding safari or a photography safari, expect some extra daily costs. Maybe $50, $100 extra per day for a specialist birding guide, or $50 and $50 for a photography trip, which might include a specially adapted vehicle.
Okay, that covers the finances pretty well. Now, let's shift to a more serious but obviously crucial topic, safety. Staying vigilant, understanding local laws. It's about being prepared, right? not paranoid.
Exactly. It's about awareness so you can relax and enjoy the amazing parts, knowing you're taking sensible precautions.
So what's the current official advice?
Well, currently, the overall travel advisory level for Tanzania is level 2. Exercise increased caution.
Okay. But you mentioned a specific region.
Yes, that's important. The Mtwara region, down in southern Tanzania near the Mozambique border, is at a higher level. Level 3, reconsider travel. That's due to risks associated with extremist activities spilling over the border.
Got it. So for the rest of the country at level 2, what are the main reasons for caution?
The main reasons cited are crime, the potential for terrorism, and unfortunately, the targeting of LGBTIQ plus persons.
Let's break those down. Crime.
Crime is described as a regular occurrence, and the authorities, frankly, have limited resources to deter it or investigate it effectively.
What kind of crime?
Specific examples given include home invasions, burglaries, particularly in places like Arusha and Dar es Salaam. And in tourist areas, pickpockets and bag snatchers specifically targeting Westerners. Also, be aware of international financial scams, emails, online stuff.
Right. And terrorism, what's the risk there?
The concern is that terrorists increasingly use less sophisticated methods, knives, guns, vehicles, to attack targets that are maybe less protected or more vulnerable.
Like where?
Places like public events, hotels, clubs, restaurants, popular with tourists, places of worship, schools, parks, shopping centers, public transport hubs, basically crowded public spaces.
So just general situational awareness is key.
Exactly. Being aware of your surroundings is always wise, anywhere in the world, but especially in these kinds of locations.
Now, you mentioned the targeting of LGBTIQ plus individuals. This is obviously a very sensitive area, but it's important travelers have the facts from the sources.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to report this impartially based on the advisories. The reality is that consensual same-sex sexual relations are illegal, a criminal offense, in Tanzania.
What are the penalties?
Convictions can lead to prison sentences of up to 30 years.
Wow.
And the sources state that authorities have used this penal code to intimidate and arrest people based on their real or just perceived sexual orientation.
That's deeply concerning.
It is. Reports also mention that individuals detained under these circumstances may be subject to or threatened with forced anal examinations. They might be denied entry to the country or targeted, harassed, or even charged with completely unrelated offenses.
So what's the practical advice?
Public displays of affection for anyone, regardless of orientation, can sometimes be met with harassment or violence. It's also noted that NGOs working to support the LGBTIQ+ community and their staff can also be targeted or detained.
And the passport rule again?
Yes, it's critical to remember that point. Tanzania only accepts passports with M or F sex markers. It's a difficult and concerning situation for LGBTIQ+ travelers, and awareness is paramount.
It really is. Moving on to local laws more generally, are there things that might catch visitors out, things that are legal back home but not there?
Definitely. You're subject to Tanzanian laws when you're there. They can be very different. You could face expulsion, arrest, or even imprisonment, sometimes for things you might do unknowingly.
Like,
Drug offenses carry extremely severe penalties, long jail terms, huge fines. That's a big one.
okay. Anything else?
Photography restrictions. You're forbidden from photographing military sites, but people have also been detained, or had cameras confiscated, for taking pictures of things like hospitals, schools, bridges, industrial sites, even airports.
Even if they're not marked as restricted.
Apparently so. These sites aren't always clearly marked, so it's best to be cautious about what you photograph, especially official-looking buildings or infrastructure.
Good to know. What about nature? Taking souvenirs?
Big no-no. It's illegal to import or export any animal or animal part without proper government certification. And you absolutely cannot gather, collect, or remove any flora or fauna.
So no picking wildflowers?
Nope. Or seashells from the beach. Or pieces of wood like ebony or the impingo wood used for carvings. Leave everything natural where you find it.
Okay. What about health on the ground? Medical facilities?
Health considerations are important. Ambulance services outside major cities are described as unreliable or not easily accessible.
And hospitals?
Medical facilities, especially outside Dar es Salaam, might not have state-of-the-art equipment. Good travel insurance with medical evacuation cover is really essential.
Right. And basic stuff. Water.
Absolutely do not drink the tap water. Stick to bottled water.
Yeah.
And be cautious about ice in drinks, unless you're sure it's made from purified water.
Altitude sickness for Kili.
Yes, definitely something to be aware of and prepared for if you're trekking Kilimanjaro or Meru. Acclimatize properly, know the symptoms.
What about emergency contacts? Who do you call?
The local emergency numbers are 111 or 112. There's also a police hotline listed as +255-787-668-3006.
Are they reliable?
The advisories note that response times can be slow and reliability isn't always guaranteed. So the advice is often to also contact your country's embassy or consulate in Dar es Salaam in any serious emergency.
Any other prep tips?
Enrolling in your home country's traveler program, like the U.S. STEP program, is a good idea. You get alerts, and it makes it easier for your embassy to find you if there's a crisis.
And document.
Keep copies of your passport photo page and your visa separate from the originals. Carry the copies with you day to day, and keep the originals locked up securely in your hotel safe, if possible.
Right. Okay, so we have covered a huge amount of ground today. It really feels like we've unpacked Tanzania. And it seems like this fascinating paradox, doesn't it? This place of just staggering natural beauty, incredible wildlife, rich culture, these truly unforgettable experiences.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's a destination that really, really demands that you do your homework, that you plan thoughtfully and go in with your eyes open.
That sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
And yes, while Tanzania might not be the absolute cheapest place to visit, especially for safari,
Right.
that investment, as we've discussed, it often buys you a richer, less crowded, and ultimately maybe a more profound experience. And
Yeah.
it really can be money well spent.
Yeah.
And understanding these cultural points we talked about, the etiquette, the safety awareness,
Yeah.
that can genuinely transform your trip. It lifts it from just being a holiday to something, well, truly memorable and impactful.
So perhaps a final thought for you, the listener. As you start planning your own Tanzanian journey, maybe take a moment to consider this. How can your choices, the tour operator you select, how you interact with local communities, how you treat the environment, how can all those small decisions shape not just your own adventure, but also leave a genuinely positive, lasting footprint on Tanzania's incredible landscapes and, just as importantly, on the lives and well-being of its people?